Hi, I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
And I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And we're the Insiders. And Chuck, normally there's no time on television or in the media for a discussion about the Secretary of State's office. There was once upon a time in the state, it was one of the most powerful offices in the land. Today, I think he's just in charge of two things, the state seal, which he's lost a couple of times, and a couple other things. But it once was a very powerful office and was hotly contested, very important. And so do you think it matters at all in this election?
Well, this is truly an insider piece. And I want to be clear, I'm taking responsibility for asking that Scott be willing to do this. But this race actually has some interesting history and actually has some relevance going forward. So let's take a rundown history road. Follette is the greatest name in Wisconsin political history. With all due respect to Governor Thompson, Bob Follette ran for president and actually had some success across the country. And this name has carried on. We've had other governors and U.S. senators, Follette, besides Bob Follette. Bob served both as governor. Fighting Bob served both as governor and as U.S. senator. My high school was Robert M. Follette High School. By the way, they got it wrong in one of the books over there, calling it Battling Bob. But that family name has carried him through, including in awful times like 2010. And so we have the Follette name surviving. But why is it relevant to today? Why, people say, well, Chuck, who cares? Well, first of all, a little history lesson. But secondly, the Republicans have a strategy now. They do not like the Wisconsin Election Commission, which was, by the way, established by the Republicans. They threw out the Government Accountability Board and they wanted the Wisconsin Election Commission, which has, at least it has balance. There are 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. In order to get anything done, you got to have at least one of the other side join you. There's a huge dispute already there about who's going to be the new chairman of that group, because the one Republican who wants it, by the way, the other Republican who says, hey, the election wasn't stolen and I'm going to leave the elections board, by the way, the one honest Republican there, his colleague wants it, but he was a fake elector to go to Washington, D.C. Oh my God, that doesn't make sense. But here's the Republican strategy. We need something new, but it's really going to be egg on our face if we actually say we want to eliminate the election commission that we did, the bipartisan election commission. I have an idea, guys. Let's go win the Secretary of State position and turn it over there. And you say, well, why does that help, Chuck? Because in most states around the country, they have their Secretary of State responsible for elections. The Republicans say, great, we're going to get to turn this into a partisan decision where he will run it. He will make sure that the Democrats can't vote in the cities, or make it a lot harder for them to vote. And we look like we're just trying to join the rest of the states. That's why this is a race to watch this year, when otherwise it shouldn't matter. And the big question will be, will the name Follette be a big enough hold that we'll be able to keep this seat Democratic, which will force the Republicans to have more egg on their face when they go to eliminate the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Now, all of this is dependent upon, of course, getting rid of Governor Evers, et cetera, et cetera. But you may find on election day that the last person who prevented them from moving this over to the Secretary of State is because of the Follette name. Bob Follette, who was active in politics nearly 150 years ago in the state of Wisconsin, still has relevance today. Tip of the hat to Bob Follette. Interesting strategy, and it is purely an insider thing, but I thought you would want to know, and you know it now, folks. Use it for your dinner conversation.
Well, you're right. We have a big Follette history in the state of Wisconsin. There have been 2 who've served as governor of this state, 2 who've served in the United States Senate, as I recall. But this Follette is not really part of that family. He's a shirt-tail relative, but he's sure done well in politics working with that name. He's now been the Secretary of State for 40 years in the state of Wisconsin. That is really extraordinary for anyone to hold a statewide office for that long. But my frustration in this thing is that the press, and now Chuck, all saying that Republicans are the ones who are trying to futz with this office. I've been around long enough, Chuck, and you'll remember this as well, that Doug Follette very early in his career had a number of missteps, including letting the Sandinistas use his office, his state office, for planning purposes. He when the Democrats controlled the legislature, they took away elections from the Secretary of State's office. They took away ethics. They took away lobbying from the Secretary of State's office. Then when the Republicans got in charge, they continued to take things away from the office. And as I said, it's down to pretty much just being in charge of the state seal and signing off on legislation that has been verified as having passed both houses and been signed by the governor. That's about it that's left in the office. And that's why some Republicans are trying to give the office some relevance again. They think that we're never going to get rid of the office, so maybe we should have it actually do something. And that's why some Republicans would like it to go to the elections. Amy Loudenbeck, who's running for Secretary of State, would like elections to be added there. Kevin Nicholson would like elections to be added there. The other two major candidates for governor don't want elections to go to the Secretary of State's office. So it's a mixed bag on the Republican side. Some favor it, some don't. But this really is an insider's deal, right? We've got a family name that's dominant state politics and an office that has had this roller coaster history for a long time.
But Scott, you say the Republicans, the Democrats are taking it. Wasn't it your party that tried to eliminate both this office and one other office at the state level? And then they
wanted to eliminate the state treasurer's office, and it went to the people, and the people said no. And so they gave up on the Secretary of State possibility.
So what we've got is Republicans who are trying to do this. They now have maybe found this as a way that we can make it look like we're not throwing out the Wisconsin Election Commission, which we set up, because we're just trying to be like the other states and throw this over to the Secretary of State. The reason that they didn't want, and the reason that these things get moved out of elective offices, is it's like at the county clerk level. Do you really have a county clerk who has a Democratic county clerk job versus a Republican? You just want people who call balls and strikes, which is why we've tried to have, for our election stuff, everybody realize you should not have a partisan in charge. So what we do is, at a minimum, we used to have the Government Accountability Board. We named all sorts of judges because they had absolutely no partisan connection. Republicans said, no, let's make it a little more partisan, but we'll do 3 Dems and 3 Republicans. So at least you've got a situation where, hey, we've got to at least convince one to go along. But now they're saying, let's go to an elected guy, and we'll do that. But guess what, Scott? That will only happen if the Republicans win everything statewide, including Secretary of State. And then they'll say, the other states do it this way, so it really does make sense. That's why, by the way, this is a below the radar insider game, because nobody's going to talk about it seriously, although a couple of candidates, Scott's right, have mentioned it. But why? Because they don't really want to say, I'm going to do that if Doug LaFollette wins and you're a Republican. What if the rare scenario happened where Tony Evers lost, every other Dem lost, but the LaFollette name carries through Doug LaFollette, and you've got a candidate for governor who's loudly and proudly saying, I want to send this over to the Secretary of State. Are they going to do that when Doug LaFollette is there? Of course not. So to me, it's a very inside baseball thing. It has a lot of history with it, both with the LaFollette name and Doug LaFollette himself. Anybody walking around the square, you might see him in his safari hat anytime. But to me, it is something that is interesting to watch. And there are some implications for public policy, which could come down the road.
All right. You brought it to the attention of our viewers. We'll see
Thanks,
you all
guys,
next week.
for tolerating me. Appreciate it. See you next time.